Hey everyone, I'm Connor Murphy. I competed in Congressional debate for 4 years at Ridge High School in Basking Ridge, New Jersey, and I'm currently a freshman at Davidson College in Davidson, North Carolina, and I'm most likely going to be an economics major. Today we're going to discuss the semifinal pieces of legislation for the Crestian Tradition, first of which is the resolution to legalize marijuana. First, let's discuss some background information on the topic. In 1972, Congress designated marijuana under Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act. And what this means is that they found 3 unique characteristics of marijuana that allow them to designate it under Schedule 1. Those are, first, the drug or other substances has a high potential for abuse. Second, the drug or other substance has no currently accepted medical use and treatment in the United States. And third, there is a lack of accepted safety for the use of the drug or other substance under medical supervision. And ever since then, there's been a large amount of contention between the states and the federal government over exactly what the United States drug policy upon marijuana should be. Some states, such as Colorado, have engaged in decriminalization efforts, which allows for no prison time or criminal record for the first-time possession or consumption of a small amount of marijuana, while other states, such as California or New Jersey, have allowed for medical marijuana due to its unique properties as a painkiller. Now that we have some background information, let's focus upon the resolution that we have presented to us today, see how it's attempting to solve the problem. Now, this resolution is a little bit vague in exactly how it's detailing that we're going to be able to legalize marijuana in the United States. It doesn't say if it's an exact federal policy or it's a state-by-state policy, so it leaves it up to the interpretation of the reader exactly how that's going to apply. So let's go line by line to see how this resolution is attempting to craft to legalize marijuana. First, the bill starts out by addressing the economic benefits. Whereas recent studies have estimated marijuana crops as a billion-dollar industry, placing it above other legalized markets. So it starts off and it predicates the rest of the statements by noting that marijuana can be a billion-dollar industry. But it's important for us to keep in mind that this is an underground economy. It's not a legitimate form of enterprise, so it's hard to track the exact amount, and as subsequently be hard to regulate it for the government and for other agencies. Next line is, whereas allowing legalized taxation of this crop could produce billions of tax revenue for the country each year. Now, knowing the precarious situation presented within the first clause, the resolution notes that if we legalize marijuana and we manage to tax it, the key part being managing taxing it, which is a whole other issue, we would have economic benefits. But the issue there is whether this resolution contains efficacy, or if we can actually achieve its intended goal of legalizing marijuana and then regulating it and obtaining tax revenue. The next line is, whereas medical use of marijuana is already legal in several states. And as previously mentioned, several states have already legalized marijuana for the use within medical purposes, primarily as a painkiller, or for other medical treatments, depending on how the doctor prescribes it. Next, whereas legislation would allow the U.S. government regulation of production of and distribution of marijuana, just as with tobacco and alcohol, again, this is a best-case scenario, because the bill simply leaves it up to the federal government and the states to actually enact the policies of regulation. Next, whereas the current U.S. economy would benefit greatly from another source of income, the statement is very vague. It's not unique to marijuana legislation or legalization, since by its logic we could utilize a number of means to create more sources of income for the federal government or for the United States as a whole. And then finally, be it resolved by the Congress here assembled that marijuana be legally sold, regulated, and taxed in the United States of America. This statement can mean a number of things, and it's unclear what level of government would enforce this resolution. It could be a combination of regulatory authorities actually enacting this plan. So ultimately, the goal of this resolution is to legalize marijuana in the hopes of actually tapping into the market as the federal government or as the state governments and harnessing it as a source of tax revenue. So now that we understand the resolution, let's discuss some positive and negative externalities or impacts of the resolution presented here today. So first, some positive impacts. Legalizing use of cannabis will lead to a large decrease in the production of designer or synthetic drugs on the market. And this is primarily because when you have an illegal drug such as marijuana, or more specifically cannabis, in the United States, individuals will attempt to create synthetic drugs by using unique chemicals to replicate the effect. And while this does engage in a supply-demand that's going on currently within the drug market, the problem is that, as noted by Malcolm Gay of the New York Times, people can't legally access marijuana within these states, use synthetic marijuana. And as the Substance Abuse and Mental Service Association from 2012 notes, in 2010 alone, over 11,000 individuals were admitted into emergency rooms because they use synthetic marijuana and face the negative harms from actually using it due to the vast amount of chemicals used to produce and replicate the effects of cannabis. So currently, we open the market for more dangerous cannabis knockoffs that put people at risk of death. Legalizing marijuana decreases the demand for these synthetic cannabis drugs. Furthermore, we're going to save thousands of lives in our nation's prison systems. While cannabis is illegal, there's a large amount of overcrowding in our nation's prison systems. And in fact, the California Department of Corrections explains that when more people are incarcerated due to low-class crimes like possession of a drug, they're more prone to attack and abuse among prisoners. So these individuals who are committing low-level crimes are being attacked by other criminals because they simply aren't engaged within the prison environment. They then get abused and used simply by the other prisoners in the prison, which creates a whole amount of societal issues both within the prison and after these prisoners have served their time. Legalization of marijuana means less overcrowding and subsequently less abuse and violence on prisoners. But now let's discuss some of the negative externalities. Actually allowing marijuana to be legalized, produced, and used in the United States would deteriorate other safer painkiller markets that bring us much more revenue and is much more stable and legal than marijuana sales would. For example, John Hughes, a researcher for the firm Elsevier, explains in his book, Pain Management, From Basics to Clinical Practice, that the side effects of certain type of painkillers are mild to non-existent, but the price is reaching highs in the market. And this is good for pharmaceutical companies because they're making record profits, which then means that they can develop new types of drugs. However, in 2012 alone, the sale of this painkiller across the United States was twice the revenue of medical marijuana sales. But if we do legalize marijuana, what's going to happen is that individuals will turn from our pharmaceutical industry to medical marijuana, thus draining the resources from that developed industry which pays high-skilled labor, provides a large amount of jobs and employment in the United States, to a new fledgling industry. And although the case can be made that the money is being redirected, the fact of the matter is that these individuals who have high skills, high paying, perhaps won't want to stay in the United States if they're not going to have the source of income anymore. There are also negative impacts that are going to happen to the children of the United States. When a state legalizes cannabis, there are a plethora of negative impacts that occur from this legalization. One of the greatest detriments is the influence of it going to have upon our children to start using drugs. Daniel J. Bernstein, psychologist at University of California at San Diego, explains that when a state decriminalizes cannabis, there is an increase of stores that sell marijuana paraphernalia, along with an increase in marijuana influence in pop culture and news. So what's going to happen is that if we legalize marijuana through this resolution, children are going to be growing up and experience a large amount more of drug culture in the United States. And this isn't a question of whether or not marijuana is harmful for an individual. Its effect upon the psychological condition of these individuals for actually going and engaging with more drug use, which it has been found empirically because when San Diego, California was decriminalized there for a period, there was an increase of 28 smoke shops specializing in marijuana products within more simply 2 years. And over that period of time, over 2 years, over half the students in San Diego high schools began trying marijuana, an increase of 22% from 2000 from the year prior. Additionally, the effects of marijuana are much worse than the actual drugs themselves, or as I mentioned, the psychological effect. And finally, it would hinder U.S. markets' ability to control marijuana producing businesses and are largely not bringing in a large amount of revenue for United States manufacturers and farmers. Since marijuana has been banned for so long, no real companies within the U.S. have really developed it upon the large scale. There have been and are legal markets that produce this. There are illegal farms and perhaps illegal corporations that the U.S. government doesn't know about that could produce it, but not the scale of international companies. For example, Forbes notes on March 26 of 2013 that Medbox, a Dutch company, outweighs all U.S. dealers and is currently taking over the U.S. market. Currently through paraphernalia, but if we were to legalize it all throughout the United States as the cannabis, it would largely be able to overtake any U.S. capabilities of production. So foreign companies would control the market and beat the United States, and even though we would get tax revenue, all that income would be drained to foreign companies.